So now that we've covered all of the basic market structure theory, we're just going to very sort of briefly and quickly go over a bit of price action on the 4 hour chart. So specifically the month of March in 2021 on our 4 hour chart, we're just going to do 1 month's worth of price action, and we're essentially just going to apply all of those theoretical concepts to actually these real life, price action examples in the market on the charts. Now, as I go through that, it's just going to give you kind of that first indication sort of how we do these, how we apply these concepts, so you can actually see what it looks like. And then after this video, what I want you to do is then go on your charts, right, from the 1st of April 2021, and I want you to go all the way to about the middle of August 2021, and I want you to map on your market structure. Basically just applying all of the concepts that we have just spoken about. Now, the reason why I want you to do it straight after this video, or at least before you watch the next video, because in the next video, we're going to do a walkthrough, and I'm going to do this, myself essentially for you guys, and we're going to go through every single bit of price action all the way to here on the 4 hour chart, mapping on structure and just really dissecting price. Just really talking through the price action that we see, so we can get a really solid understanding of going through it in depth. But I think you will get a hell of a lot more out of watching that video if you have a go at doing it yourselves first, because if you just watch the theoretical video that you're watching now, right, and then you watch the next video where I'm going to walk through and apply the concepts, it potentially could seem quite easy. Go yeah, all of that makes sense, right? But then when you go to do it yourself, that's when suddenly you realize where the gaps may be in your knowledge or your understanding. So yeah, I just personally think if you watch me do 1 month's worth of price action now, and then you go and do all of this, so April 2021 to middle of August 2021, if you have a go at mapping that yourself, and then you can watch the next video and you can kind of compare and contrast to sort of how you saw things, and you can hear my thought process as we go through, and I just think you'll get a hell of a lot more out of it if you've given it a go and attempted it first. Now, what I will say is, at a bare minimum, just mark out your swing structure. So just do your swing highs and your swing lows. But ideally, just really spend your time going over this in a lot more detail and really going through, looking at minor breaks and substructure breaks. But anyway, I think as we go through this 1 month bit of price action now that I'm going to do, you'll kind of get a good feel for it. So if we look at the start of March and around up here, what we can see before we kind of start to map the structure that we're looking at is we kind of need to trace back a little bit just to make sure that we know where the actual true trend is, and that we're not analyzing what potentially could be substructure here. Let me just change the color of this so we can see it a little bit clearer. There we go. Just to make sure, right, because sometimes you could zoom right in, just think, we're just bullish, when potentially, it could be actually substructure with a bigger high and a bigger low. But yeah, if we look back, you can see here, we then switched bullish. We had the pullback, then we broke that high, so we're clearly in that bullish trend, and then we pull back here and then took that high there. So let's take a look at this kind of first low here. Just going to use the info line. So the way that I personally use to draw structure, you can use a trend line, but I personally just use the info line, and then I'm just going to map that from that low there. So generally, when you're mapping your drawing structure and you want it to be very accurate from the wick, what you want to use is magnet mode on over here. And what that means is, when I put my mouse near, see how it just snaps on without my mouse even being near to it, and that way you can get really accurate drawings. And then when you want to draw your line across, if you hold down shift, right, so if I move my mouse away, you can see for the most part, right, it will keep the line straight as you draw across. So just a really handy tool there. Another thing as well is, say if you're using the paintbrush tool, right, and you want to draw without kind of it sticking to the price action, so you basically want magnet mode to be off. If you hold down control or command, you can see how that's flashing. When I hold it down, it temporarily takes magnet mode off, and that means I can draw nice and freely without it kind of trying to snap it to each bit of the candle. But anyway, there's just a few little sort of trading tips there, trading view tips I should say. Now I'm just going to change this to the pre-saved templates that I have for my 4 hour break of structure. So when I click on that, it populates how I want it to kind of map it out. So you can do this a multiple number of ways. The first thing I would advise is you look at the visibility settings. So when you draw your 4 hour structure, in this case, the way that I personally want the structure to show is to only show on this time frame and lower. So of course we'll talk about multi time frame analysis in a much more detail in a future lesson, so don't worry about too much about this now if you don't really understand what's going on. But generally what I would advise is for whatever time frame you're drawing your analysis on, generally you only want it to appear on that time frame and lower, just because when you start jumping up the time frames it can make your charts look extremely messy. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. And obviously you can then put your text in here. Now what you also may want to do, I just have it in the middle just to keep it simple, but for a bearish break of structure you may want to switch that to the bottom, right? And if it was say a bullish break of structure, you may want to switch change it to the top and then save those both as different settings there. But I just keep it simple, just means I have to have one less click and just keep it in the middle. And obviously you can then change the style of the lines and have a play around with that all there. But yeah, that's essentially how I do it. So let's concentrate on actual structure. So we have a nice pullback here, we make that high, and then we come down and we get a closure below that low. So where is our swing high at this point when we get a closure below the low? It's this point up here. So this is a tool I use. If you open up the symbols, just essentially use this circle just to mark out the swing points visually there as well. So we get our break of structure to the downside. Now, did we have any indication that potentially price was starting to weaken and come down lower before we actually got that break of structure? Well, if you look here, what did we have? We had a movement up, right? And then you see this candle here, right? It fails to breach this candle's high. This candle, let me zoom right in and you'll see exactly what I mean. So you see how we move up and we pull back, right? Because that candle, if I move this out of the way, fails to take out this candle's high, right? So that means it's a minor pullback and we get that break of structure to the upside. So what that means is that because that took that minor high, it now means we have a minor low here. So then when price moves up and then comes down and spikes that low, what we have is a minor break of structure once we get the candle closure below that low, but we also have a change of character, right? That internal change of character. So I can also mark that out here. So if I have a pre-saved template, it's a little bit hard to see, but essentially just a dotted line there just to show me that we have that minor break of structure to the downside. We have that 4-hour change of character. Now, what does that change of character signify? It signifies that the pullback may potentially about to start, right? Because it's that first sign of that internal lower low on the 4-hour chart, right? That first sign of weakness, that first sign of a pullback, or potentially that the reversal is also going to happen, which is what we got, okay? But of course, it's not confirmed until we get a closure below the actual low, which we then do get. Then price continues to move down. Now, this for me is just a bit of a minor pullback, right? It's just a pause in price action. That for me is not a swing structural high. So for me, this is all part of the down move, right? So this is all one big swing leg. And then we see, right, the true sort of swing back kick in. So for me, this down here is then the swing low. So when we get a break of structure, a 4-hour break of structure, what do we expect? We expect a 4-hour pullback, right? But how do we know when that 4-hour pullback is going to kick in? Well, of course, there's plenty of confluence that we can use, such as supply and demand zones and liquidity concepts and multi-time frame analysis. But that's all the stuff that we're going to get into in a bit, right? We haven't spoken about any of that stuff just yet. So right now, all I want you to think about is just the concepts that we have learned, right, in this lesson about market structure and just on one time frame, and keep it very simple. So just based on market structure alone, what can we use to signify that the pullback or the run has ended and the pullback is about to kick in? We can look at those minor breaks of structure, right? So we have the movement down, we have a minor pullback, we have the movement down, then we have a minor pullback here, and then we have the movement down, and then we come up and we take that minor high, right? We have a minor break of structure to the upside. So I'm just going to grab this tool here just so I don't have to keep grabbing up here. So if you want to copy and paste a tool, duplicate a tool, if you click or if you hold down Command or Control and then you click and drag the tool that you want, it will just give you another one there. And then we'll snap that into place there, okay? So, whoops, it's not meant to go that far. So now we get that 4-hour change of character, and that shows the swing one's gonna end, and we have that minor break of structure to the upside. Now, how far do we know that pullback's gonna go purely in terms of market structure? Well, we look for a change of character back to the downside, right? Back in line with the overall bearish trend, because remember at this point, we are within this bearish range where that high is, and where this low is. So what can happen in theory, if I move this out of the way, right, is because this high, right, took out a low, this is now a strong high, and this high should be protected because big money stepped in, right? So now price should not come all the way up, and it should not breach this high, right? And it will stay bearish as long as it doesn't take out that high. So in this case, we get the pullback, right? How do we know the pullback's over? Well, what do we have? We have the movement up, we have a minor pullback like that, right? And then we have that minor break of structure to the upside. So this then becomes a minor low, and then price takes out that low. So then we have that change of character back to the downside again. We are now bearish in line with the overall bearish trend, right? So the internal structure is now bearish. So now we expect that this weak low is likely to go because it never took out the high, and then price continues to the downside, right? So when we get, let's delete these lines. When we get that that second 4 hour break of structure, so let's map it out, right? Map it across here. Where is our new lower high? Where is our new swing high? Well, it's the highest point before this low broke, right? So the highest point between the previous range. So we look at where the previous low was. That's where the pullback initiated. And it's the highest point from where that pullback started to where we then got the break of structure. So this one's a pretty easy one to spot, right? This will clearly be our swing high. And then price has a pretty big impulsive move to the downside. We have a bit of a minor pause in price action there. That for me is not a swing. And then we have another movement down. So that's all part of the one big swing leg. And then we are playing within this range here, okay? So then we can mark out our swing low with that circle line. And now, how do we know, or sorry, what I should say is, what do we expect after a 4 hour break of structure? We expect a 4 hour pullback, right? How do we know when that 4 hour pullback is likely to begin? Well, we can look for a change of character to the upside. And what do we get? We get that minor break of structure over here, right? And then that is our change of character there to the upside. Now there was a substructure break before, right? Because this is the minor high, and then we get the movement down. Now we get this movement up here, and then price breaks this high here, but that is purely just a substructure break, right? So it's not as significant. It is a sign, but it's not as significant until we break minor structure, of course, which is more significant than a substructure break. So that's your first real kind of decent change of character that the pullback is kicking in. But again, the trend is quite strong in this case, so we get the movement up. Then we come down and we take out this minor low, so we do get another change of character to the downside. So potentially now this is going to be our 4 hour new lower high, and now we can look to start to target this weak low, okay? So we get that movement down. Now price does change character again to the upside, right? But it never takes out this high, so it kind of stays bearish, right? That potential lower high is never breached, and then we start to change character again to the downside again. And then we start to go, right? So it's not always super nice, but you get a nice little trend when you're moving up, you get a change of character, and then it just goes straight away, right? Sometimes price can chop around a little bit, start to form a bit of a range, and it can get a little bit more complex. But the main thing that you should always do if you ever get confused is, as long as you have your high marked out, it's not a very well drawn line, but your high and your low marked out, then at least you know where the predominant trend is. And as long as you're kind of looking for shorts, you're not going to go too far wrong, right? Because you're trading with the predominant trend in that case. So then what do we have? We get our 4 hour break of structure. Now a really important but kind of simple point to note is that we never actually know that this is a confirmed low high, right? Until we get this break of structure and the candle closure below that low there, because you can see everything you want to see, and you can see prices coming down really nicely, right? And you can have really high conviction that we are going to get that break of structure and we are going to get that lower low, but price can still come all the way down to here, and then it could go all the way back up again, right? And we could get a break of these highs and price could keep going up. But remember, we are still within this bearish range until that high is taken out. So all that means is we've just formed a bit more of a complex pullback before potentially we may then go, right? So remember, this lower high here that does eventually form is not confirmed until we get that break of structure. But of course, we can start to anticipate that it may be the lower high when we start to see those bearish changes of character, right, to the downside. So just do another little bit towards the end of the month, and then we'll start to wrap this up. Right, so where is our swing point? I've drawn it on already, so I've given you the answer, but you can see that was just about the highest point before that low broke from the previous range, right? You look where the pullback started, and you just find the highest point from there before the low went, and then we are in our next swing range. Now, once we get that break of structure, we start to pull down, and then we get quite a decent pullback there. So this is kind of one of those ones where it's a little bit subjective whether you would call that a swing pullback or it's just a minor pullback. For me personally, I'm happy enough to call that a swing pullback, right? It's a decent number of candles. We had a pretty big sustained move there, and then we eventually took that low. So I personally will be calling that swing structure. Now, this is where trading, it's a little bit of a gray area. Everyone's going to view things slightly differently. And if you don't view this as swing structure, right, and you view this entire leg as the swing, that's okay, right? That's more than okay. But the main thing is that you are always consistently viewing structure that way, and you always map it the same way like that, right? So it doesn't matter if you do it the way I've just done it or if you do it more conservatively. What it matters is that you do it consistently. Because remember, we are playing a random game in an uncertain environment. So how do we increase our probability of getting consistent results in a really inconsistent arena? Well, we have to be consistent in the variables that we can control, right? And obviously our analysis is what we have control over, so we need to be consistent in how we're mapping it. So that's just kind of a point I would want to make about that. Okay, so then we then get that lower low, right? And then this would be my lower high here at that point, and we are then playing within that bearish range between here. So that brings us pretty much to the end of March. Now, what I want you to do is go onto on your charts now, right, from April, the start of April 2021, and then just basically do what I've done there and go along all the way to August 2021 as well. Really take your time. The most important thing I want you to concentrate on is just mark out your actual true swing breaks of structure, and then mark out your actual swing highs and your swing lows, right? Whether you want to use a dot or just a way of marking it. And then, what I would also really advise is that you spend time looking at these minor breaks of structure. You may want to mark out the substructure breaks as well. You may even want to write emboss on it, for example, just so you kind of can really picture them out in your mind, if that helps. May not necessarily recommend it in a live market, just if you want to kind of keep your charts nice and clear. But yeah, whilst you're kind of practicing, that can definitely be very, very useful too. But the questions you want to be asking yourself, is what do we expect after a break of structure? We expect a pullback. How do we know when that pullback's about to start? We look for a minor break of structure, okay? How do we know the pullback's about to end? We look for a minor break of structure to the downside, right? And that's how you can say it in your mind. Then when we get the break of structure, how do we know where the swing high is? We look for the highest point, right, before that low broke, so on and so forth. And just really study and practice kind of how you can try and spot in advance where that pullback may be kicking in, right, and where that pullback may be ending. And this is going to be really, really key. But anyway, I don't want to keep going on because obviously this video is pretty long now already. But yeah, have a go at doing all of this, and then watch the next video and you'll see me go through it really slowly, step by step. And yeah, you can see my thought process in a lot more detail, and I think you will really get a lot out of it. Now, the last point I want to make is when you do this, right, save down a new template before you start the activity, and just save it down and call it, I don't know, call it whatever you want, backtesting, practice arena, I don't know, whatever floats your boat. But the reason why I want you to do that is because what we're going to do now through all of these technical analysis lessons and the module is we're going to, obviously you've just learned, right, the basic market structure concepts and those theories. We're now applying them to the charts. And then from then on, from each lesson, you're going to learn a new concept, or we're going to build, more advanced ideas into those concepts that we've just looked at. And then we're going to go onto the chart and we're going to apply it. And then we're going to go into the next lesson, right? We're going to learn the next bit of theory, and then we're going to apply it back into our charts. So as we go through the whole module, right, this whole bit of price action is going to, we're going to start essentially layering on those concepts that you're learning, and it's all going to start, to piece together that big puzzle, that we are, trying to create. So basically it's just going to save you a lot of time, that you don't have to keep redrawing this every time you hop onto the charts. But anyways, I'll leave it there, have a go, and then see how you get on when we jump into the next video.